Hello, and welcome to Atheist Talk. I'm Cynthia Egli, and I'm the president of Minnesota Atheists. This program will be us talking about reproductive rights and reproductive health. We have a lot of interest in this area as atheists, and it may not be obvious why that would be, but we do, and that's because many of the issues there are affected deeply by religion. Things such as abortion rights are affected by the fact that many people consider that the conceptus, the fertilized cell, actually has a soul. And in the case in which you believe in that, it becomes serious to consider that life as something on the equivalent scale as that of a full human being. We don't believe in a soul, so that we believe that the brain develops as part of the course of development of an embryo, and so that at any point in that time we have to think about where that embryo is and make decisions that are based on the consequences of its birth to the mother, to other family members, and to the world at large as part of our ethical considerations. We have consequentialist ethics, so what's important to us is what is going to happen to people as a consequence of the birth of a child, especially one that's not wanted. We also prefer strongly that every child be wanted. We think that they have the right to have parents that are ready for them, who care for them and really want to do their best, because it's darned hard to be a parent, even when you want to do it. So that's very important to us. And in other areas, a lot of the attitudes towards sexuality that are so limited and so fearful are based on centuries of religious attitudes about sexuality as something fundamentally evil. And to us, sexuality is simply a normal human or animal even function, and that there's no need to get excited about it, but to think about it in terms of responsibility and health and things like that, which requires education. So those things are of concern to atheists, and we have invited a guest tonight to talk with us. I have tonight Tim Stanley. He's the Director of Government and Public Relations for Planned Parenthood of Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota.
That's right.
So he's very knowledgeable in these areas, and we're very glad to have you with us, Tim.
Great. Well, thank you so much for this, Cynthia. I'm really glad to be here. Planned Parenthood, believes that reproductive freedom and health is a fundamental human right, and we encourage people of all political parties and all religious affiliations and non-religious affiliations to reach across the aisle and join us in our core mission of protecting and affirming human rights to reproductive freedom and health.
Yeah, we recognize, even as atheists, that this is of interest and importance to people of all different kinds. It's really not just our issue in any way at all. There are many religious people who understand the importance of these issues and are right in there with us in their attitude towards what you do.
Yeah. I mean, if you just take, the cross-section of America, cross-section of Minnesota, the vast majority of people in America and in Minnesota believe in access to birth control, access to comprehensive sex education for their young people, and of course, actually access to illegal and safe abortion as well. And so we believe, in those mainstream values, and I'm happy to have an opportunity to talk to the audience about it.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So one of the things we wanted to do was start out with what's going on in the local political environment with respect to reproductive issues and rights and health and all of that. And there's been a big shift recently, with the most recent elections.
Sure.
So why don't you talk to us about some of the things that have happened and how they affect the things that you do?
Sure. Well, the election last November of 2006 was, essentially the election of, my lifetime so far. Pretty remarkable results. We went from a legislature, both bodies, the House and the Senate, were firmly in anti-choice hands and had been for nearly a decade. And we, for the first time ever, appear to have, now we won't know until the final votes are counted, but it appears that we have a very solid pro-choice majority in the 67-member Minnesota Senate, and it looks as if we are narrowly pro-choice in the 134-member Minnesota House of Representatives. And that is a gain, at least in the Minnesota House of Representatives, of more than 20 seats in one election on the pro-choice issue. And that is a fairly remarkable gain. And Planned Parenthood have worked awfully hard and spent a lot of money through our political action committee to make some of those results possible, but we don't pretend that it was just us. There was, of course, an enormous tide for progressives, if you will, in this state and nationwide. And so it's all looking good for us right now to sort of make sure that our agenda, which is we would consider to be a prevention-based agenda, an agenda around making sure that women, regardless of ability to pay, have access to effective birth control, that school children are taught abstinence-based but also comprehensive sex education that's age appropriate and culturally appropriate as well. And also that we make sure we maximize our relationship with the federal government regarding family planning funding and things like that. So, I mean, that's our basic agenda moving forward for the next, what we would consider a legislative biennium, which is 2 years, a pretty common sense agenda. And we have to be also very mindful of the fact that the governor of the state is still Governor Pawlenty, and he is not necessarily supportive of our pro-choice plank. I would say that he is not antagonistic towards our prevention plank. However, he has signed 3 anti-choice bills in his short tenure as governor, so we are not in a position to be repealing any of the anti-abortion laws that have passed in the last few years, but we are in a position right now to really make sure that we can have a serious reduction in the unintended pregnancy rate in Minnesota, and we're very proud of that opportunity.
That's great to hear. I was surprised when I first came here. I lived in California before I came here, and I was very surprised to discover, because I thought of this as a progressive state, that the legislature was very much biased towards the anti-choice side of things, and I would have thought it would be otherwise.
Yeah, you know, we have at one time in history, in 1996, we had a pro-choice Senate by a couple of votes, and it held on for about a year. But there were a couple of judicial appointments, there were a couple of retirements, I think there was even one death, and our majority shrank, and we never got it back. But the Minnesota House, like I mentioned, up until last year was more than 20 votes down on the pro-choice, anti-choice headcount, and we recouped that in one election fairly dramatically. So that's all really good, and I think if we talk to legislators that have been around for many years, or just observers for many years in the Minnesota legislature, they'll go back to the days of the 1970s, when there were literally a handful of legislators in either body who were pro-choice. So we feel as though we are always willing to educate people, to increase our numbers, and I think in this last election we really proved that we can bring out the voters and really recruit really good candidates to run as well.
That's great. I really appreciate the work that you do, both as a representative of the atheist community and also for myself personally, because access to those things, to abortion and to birth control and just basic reproductive health care.
Right.
Has been provided by Planned Parenthood for a long time.
Right. And I appreciate that because people do, some people have connotations of Planned Parenthood. Some people are fixated on our access on our birth control clinics, and some people really think that we're just abortion. But we also are one of the largest providers of breast and cervical cancer screenings in the state, and really go a long way to making sure that the new HPV vaccine is going to be available to women who now can prevent themselves from be inoculated from getting cervical cancer later in life. And these are the kinds of things that we of course want to draw some attention to, because yes, abortion, we will always stick by our core fundamental belief in a woman's right to choose. We will never retreat from that. But people also have to know that it really makes up less than 5% of our overall services, and we're out there educating 60,000 men and women every year and providing them services every year on these basic reproductive health issues, and that's really important to the welfare of our three-state region.
Well, one of the things that's great about it is that the focus is that every child will be a wanted child. And so that means not just that you want people to have the right to choose so that they can have a child when they want a child, not when they don't. It's my understanding you also have programs for those who want a child and have had difficulty.
Absolutely,
having a child. So
excellent point.
It's not that you're opposed to children, which is sometimes an accusation that comes out. If somebody's having trouble, they can come for help with that too.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I thank you, Cynthia, because I think that people kind of lose sight of the fact that being pro-choice really means that you believe in the full continuum of reproductive health care. From basic primary sexuality education, which we've talked about, to access to birth control, to access to prenatal care when they do become pregnant, to access to infertility treatments when they can't get pregnant, to access to all of their adoption options, as well. But of course, then as well, the absolute fundamental right to terminate a pregnancy if a woman believes that's in her best interest. And we believe in that full continuum. We will not retreat from one part of that continuum, but we also believe it's part of a whole, and we need to be out there educating people about that.
And that's just really wonderful. I wish everybody understood that.
Right.
About Planned Parenthood.
Yeah. Well, and while we, can feel really great about what we do, and we do have enemies out there that are looking to take us down at every opportunity, and just because we've had a successful election, this year, doesn't mean that our primary opposition of the Minnesota Citizens Concerned for Life will not be out there every day with their group of lobbyists to try to pin our friends to the wall on abortion issues, looking to defeat them in the next election. And we just have to be always aware of that they're out there. And I think that the big thing that they're going to be pushing this legislative session, if I'm reading the tea leaves right, is a ban on public funding for abortion, because currently Minnesota is one of a handful of states that offers women who are dependent on the state for their, or dependent on the government for their health care through the Medicaid system. We do provide abortion coverage through Medicaid in Minnesota. And the MCCL, since 1995, when this became a fact, has been trying to roll that back every year since. And that is something that I believe they're going to continue to bring back, if not every session, every month of session, every week of session, every day of session, to try to pin our friends up against the wall to try to defeat them in the next election. So we're poised, we're out there educating our people about the need to make sure that all reproductive rights are available to all women regardless of income, and that's one of our core values.
So what plans do you have as an organization to try to promote with the legislature in this coming these coming sessions? Do you have particular angles that you're going to be working?
Yeah. Well, we definitely do. And for us, we definitely have more friends than we've ever had before. We've got longtime friends as chairs of some of the committees, and this is all working out very well for us. But again, I think because we have a governor who isn't supportive of us, and because we have to always be aware of the next election in just 2 years away, and we have to be aware of the fact that our enemies are around every corner, we are going to be, again, sort of really focusing in on Planned Parenthood's core mission of prevention of unintended pregnancies, prevention of disease and infection, working to educate people about overall reproductive health and freedom, and really getting back to affirming the human right to reproductive freedom and health. And that's what we're going to be doing. So family planning, increasing our federal and state Medicaid waiver match, and sex education in the schools. Primary mission, focusing on those things, getting our legislative allies to see that this is where we are, and the people we believe overwhelmingly support that mission.
Okay. Are there any specific things that have gone on? It's been kind of an interesting time because of the situation in South Dakota and things like that. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, I mean, South Dakota is we run the only abortion clinic in South Dakota. We provide termination services to about 800 women a year in South Dakota, so not a tremendous amount, but key services, because women without our clinic of the state of South Dakota would be driving upwards of 7, 8, 9 hours to be able to get to the next abortion clinic, whether it be in Montana, North Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, what have you. So we were a leader of the coalition that defeated the abortion ban in South Dakota. We took it to the ballot. We took it to the people. We defeated the ban overwhelmingly. By 56-44, by 12 points more than this that I ever thought was possible. And so we're very pleased by that. I think we sent a message. I think it's very clear that we sent a message that even in a pro-life state like South Dakota, with that they have no tolerance for politicians playing politics with women's lives.
Using the opportunity to gain something so they can take it to the Supreme Court to try to overthrow Roe versus Wade.
Exactly.
And in the process, creating laws in which even women who've been raped or suffered incest and things of this sort are still unable to protect themselves from the consequences. And it seems that even a large proportion of those who are anti-abortion feel that there are circumstances where women have to have that right.
Yep.
And I think that's an important thing for that conservative end of the spectrum to realize, is that even though they have some support pretty far out, it's not total.
Right, you're absolutely right. I mean, and you know, our victory in South Dakota, I think, could be dovetailed with the victories on the coast. There was abortion parental notification referendum in California and Oregon, which were both defeated as well. So we won all of the statewide referendums, and then also in Congress, we won in federal Congress. We won more seats in the House of Representatives, in the Senate. Where it's not quite as good a situation as we are here in Minnesota. In other words, we don't have pro-choice majorities in either the Senate or the House in Washington. However, we have pro-choice leadership of the House. Nancy Pelosi is the first woman Speaker of the House. She's the first, she's pro-choice. She's adamantly so.
Yes.
She's wonderful. That's going to bring in a new day. We have excellent leadership in the Senate. Harry Reid considers himself not to be pro-choice, but interestingly, he is one of the few people who would identify himself as being pro-life, but also is very supportive of sex education and family planning, which is great for us, and we can work with that, and that is something that we can, again, bring back some rational reproductive health care policies to this nation, which, truthfully has been starved of those rational policies for the past many years. And, I think best exemplified by this very recent appointment of Eric Kerouac, Dr. Eric Kerouac, to be the Assistant Deputy Secretary of State for Population Affairs. And he's the gentleman who's going to oversee the largest the birth control program in federal government, the Title X program, and he is an anti-choice obstetrician gynecologist. It happened right after the election. President Bush appointed this gentleman, and I think that us being, having friends in Congress, we might be able to do something about that appointment, because it just makes no sense. We have a tone-deaf administration who missed the message of the election, which was enough with the extremism, let's get back to some common sense values.
So this man is totally anti-abortion.
Correct.
But is he supportive at all of education and birth control?
Well, it depends a little bit on who you listen to. I mean, he and his supporters would claim that he has prescribed birth control to some of his patients. However, at the same time, he was the medical director of one of the largest franchises of what we can call crisis pregnancy centers in Massachusetts, which not only do not refer the women who come to them for abortion, but will also not discuss and refer or prescribe contraceptives with women who come to them as well. So they are what we would call the fake clinic, where they set up they're not medical facilities, they bring women in who are traumatized by a potential unintended pregnancy, and they feed them misinformation, they coerce them into taking their pregnancies to term. This Dr. Kerouac was leader of one of those crisis pregnancy centers. So we find a huge disconnect between what his allies are saying about him and what he really stood for and the values that he preached at this.
Well, you can honestly say that you've prescribed birth control for a lot of reasons, because lots of women take birth control. I did myself for long periods of time, having nothing to do with birth control.
Exactly.
Simply because that prevented, in my case, menstrual cramps, which made it easier to get to work every day.
Go. Right.
And so that was a whole different matter, and one would hope that he could have prescribed them for that purpose without having to say, well, I'm sorry, you're in the wrong age group. And so even if you do have menstrual cramps, and this would help it, even if you're not having any sex at all, you still can't have them, because then you might, if he's taking that attitude. But he should be able to say he has, because there's so many other reasons.
Well, you're absolutely right, of course, but it's just remarkable. Here he is, he's the leader of the Title X program. Title X program's been around since the Nixon administration. Are now, by comparison, very moderate Nixon administration founded the Title X program, funds it to the tune, that it's able to reach out to about 50 million women every year in this country. It's a huge program. It prevents 100 million unintended pregnancies every year. It's a great program, and it is seriously underfunded. It's only reaching about 30% of the population that is otherwise eligible for it. The funding needs to be expanded, and it's in the hands of this anti-choice doctor. it's remarkable. So
It's
we're hoping
disturbing.
that it's disturbing, it's remarkable. I'm
me.
hoping that our Congress, our new Congress, will be able to do something about his appointment.
If this was an appointment, doesn't he have to have approval, or is this just one of those appointments they just make?
Yeah, it's one of those appointments that they just make. However, his boss has to, of course, the Congress now has subpoena power. So there are all kinds of things that can be done. We cannot directly roll back this person's appointment, but we can. The pressure can be put on so acutely that we can make it seem very, a real breath of fresh air, if they roll back this man's appointment.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's just so contrary to the purpose of the job to have
Exactly.
someone like that in that role.
Exactly
It's
right.
very, very disturbing. How about the Supreme Court? I mean,
Right.
we've had some recent changes
Right.
in the makeup of the Supreme Court, and
Right.
for those of us who are pro-choice
Yep.
very
Yep.
strongly,
Yep.
it's been disturbing
Yep.
to see the changes.
Yeah.
What kinds of things have been happening so far? Have we gotten any better feel on some of our new justices?
Sure. Well, I mean, just, to sort of educate people just a little bit, I mean, the Supreme Court is 9 members, and it is, at the time of Roe versus Wade, we had 7 pro votes for Roe versus Wade in 1973. At the last abortion decision that came down in 2000, which was a ruling on so-called partial birth abortion, when Sandra Day O'Connor was still on the court, we had a 5-4 majority saying that bans on so-called partial birth abortion were unconstitutional. The same ban, essentially the same ban, is now under review by the Supreme Court again. On an appeal from the Bush administration. And it is a big deal because we've had 2 changes in the court. We've had John Roberts take over for Chief Justice Rehnquist. Essentially, we believe a swap of anti-choice members. But Justice Samuel Alito has replaced Sandra Day O'Connor. And I, would, be reserved in saying, exactly that Samuel Alito is anti-choice or what, but it's by basis of his rulings and his judicial temperament, it seems as if he is going to be a vote to uphold the constitutionality of the ban on so-called partial birth abortion. And so we don't know, the decision isn't due until summer, but it looks as if we're on a track right now where the Supreme Court could be saying that states can ban abortion after a certain gestational age in their state. So,
And what is there, just to talk about this a little bit on this partial birth abortion thing, I have actual experience with a family member who worked for years and years to have a child, and they were not successful. And they finally became pregnant, and it was a huge thrill. Okay. And when they got to the point, because she was older, that they could have an amniocentesis. They did, and there was a serious birth defect. The kind of birth defect that meant that the infant would be born unable to survive. Clearly would not survive more than a week or 2, with all kinds of expensive hospital care, if it survived to birth, which was not sure that it could do that either. The risks that are involved here. Not only do we know this baby is going to die, but this puts the mother through the rest of the pregnancy and additional difficulties, which adds risk to her personally. And so they made a very, very difficult decision. I mean, after working for 12 years, to terminate that pregnancy. But it was safer to terminate the pregnancy at that point than to continue to childbirth, which is something people don't seem to understand. They talk about how risky abortion is, but it's actually much safer than childbirth.
Exactly.
And so they had to do that, and they have a child now that just happened without any effort, and he's a very wonderful boy. But it was a very painful thing to do. It was not something they just did at random. And to have something like this prohibited for some arbitrary reason is very, very upsetting to me. People don't think of it in those terms.
They don't think about it in those terms until it becomes personal for them. I mean, that's one of the things that we've learned. We learned it in South Dakota. We learned it, we learned it every day when these bans have been come up for the last decade, that, you know, there are those very personal, tragic stories of wanted pregnancies that go wrong, and that, you know, we fundamentally believe, and we believe that the vast majority of Americans fundamentally believe that, you know, women and doctors in consultation with their families should be the ones who make these very personal, private medical decisions.
And very personal, very difficult decisions.
Exactly. Politicians have no role to play in these decisions, and to take away an option from women who have these pregnancies go wrong is compounding a tragedy with another tragedy. And I just hope that when the Supreme Court, you know, makes their decision, that they have the wisdom to keep these decisions in the hands of women.
Do you see much of a chance of an attempt to overturn Roe versus Wade?
It's really interesting. I think that the answer would have been yes, you know, previous to the South Dakota, you know, determination. And that's how fundamental that was, right here in our region. I think that at present, it's probably not the case. I do not think that there's going to be a case. I think they're going to be continuing to nibble at the margins and to make, I mean, basically their strategy since Roe has always been to take a marginalized population of women and make abortion inaccessible to them, be it low-income women or women late in pregnancy.
Or young women.
Or young women, for example.
They have
exactly
the
right.
waiting periods.
Exactly.
Which doesn't seem like a big problem when you live in a big city, but if you are in South Dakota and there's no clinic nearby, you have to drive 7 hours and you have to come back 24 hours later for the procedure.
Exactly.
That is no small thing.
Nope, exactly right.
And they've been doing that kind of nibbling for a long time.
And I think that's what they're going to continue to do. Because it keeps it under the radar. They can craft their restrictions in language that people think is reasonable and that people think, oh, that makes sense. But they don't see the larger impact of these things. And you collectively add up all these restrictions, and you've got higher cost, less accessibility, making these decisions. They're not doing anything, they're not lifting a finger to prevent unattended pregnancy. What they're doing is just making abortion, you know, harder to obtain and more expensive.
Yeah, that's really sad. Well, we're coming down towards the end of our time here, getting close. And I wonder if there's anything else that you would like to be sure that you get in here before we close.
You know, I think that everyone, you know, in the audience should know, you know, that we've got a little bit of a new day here in Minnesota. Our Congress in Washington is going to be able to pass some rational healthcare policies. I think this is all good, but I think we've still got this tragedy happening internationally, where we've got the Bush administration cutting funding for family planning programs overseas. And I think that's just an example of exporting ideology that I think is unconscionable.
Well, this is a situation where they're cutting it off because supposedly because they don't want to support abortions, when the vast majority of this money goes to birth control, which is a life and death issue for so many women in these other countries, that it's just that is a tragic on a massive
birth control
scale.
And sexually transmitted diseases like HIV, which is just running rampant in the third world. So it is an unconscionable act, I think, fundamentally an un-American act, and I think it's a tragedy.
Well, we're going to have to wrap it up now. I really want to thank you, Tim, for coming and speaking with me tonight and talking about these issues. And I want to let our audience know that we're Minnesota Atheists, and you've probably seen something on the screen that shows our website and our phone number. And please contact us if you are interested. We can send you a free newsletter if that's of interest to you. And we would love to hear from you if you would like to. If you're interested in us, we're interested in you.